What happens when one of Hollywood's most controversial figures sits down with one of television's most outspoken hosts? And the conversation takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Today, we're diving into the explosive exchange between Mel Gibson and Joy Behar on The View that had everyone talking. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts on celebrity interviews gone wrong. The morning started like any other at The View studio. Mel Gibson had been booked as a guest to promote his latest directorial project, a war drama that critics were already calling his comeback film. The producers knew it would be ratings gold, bringing together Gibson's magnetic screen presence with the show's reputation for hard-hitting conversations. What they didn't expect was just how hard those hits would land. As Gibson walked onto the set, the audience erupted in applause. He waved, flashed that familiar smile, and took his seat at the discussion table. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sunny Hostin, greeted him warmly. But Joy Behar sat back in her chair, arms crossed, wearing an expression that could cut glass. "Welcome back to The View, Mel," Whoopi said, trying to maintain the show's friendly atmosphere. "It's great to have you here to talk about your new film." "Thanks for having me," Gibson replied, his Australian accent still thick after decades in Hollywood. "It's always interesting coming on shows like this. You never know what you're going to get." Joy leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, I think you know exactly what you're going to get, Mel. The question is whether you're prepared to handle it." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. Even the camera operators seemed to sense something brewing. Gibson tilted his head, studying Joy's face with the same intensity he once brought to his most dramatic roles. "I'm sorry, Joy, but I'm not sure what you mean by that," Gibson said, his voice steady, but with an edge creeping in. "Are you suggesting I can't handle a simple conversation about my work?" "Simple." Joy let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. "Nothing about you is simple, Mel. Your past, your statements, your choices. Should we talk about those, or are we just going to pretend they don't exist?" Whoopi tried to intervene. "Joy, maybe we should focus on the film first, and then—" "No, Whoopi." Joy cut her off, never taking her eyes off Gibson. "I think the audience deserves to know who they're really listening to. Don't you agree, Mel?" Gibson's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "I think the audience is smart enough to make their own decisions about me and my work. I'm here to talk about a film that I'm proud of that tells an important story. If you're not interested in that, then maybe I'm on the wrong show." "Oh, you're on exactly the right show," Joy shot back. "This is where we ask the tough questions that other programs won't ask. This is where we hold people accountable for their actions." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table, while Sunny Hostin kept glancing between Joy and the producers offstage, clearly wondering if someone should step in. "Accountable?" Gibson repeated, his voice rising slightly. "I've been accountable. I've apologized for my mistakes. I've worked to make amends, and I've tried to move forward. What more do you want from me?" Joy leaned back in her chair, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips. "I want honesty, Mel. I want you to stop hiding behind this redemption narrative and admit that some things can't just be forgiven and forgotten. And who made you the judge of what can and can't be forgiven?" Gibson fired back. "Who gave you the authority to decide when someone has paid enough for their mistakes?" The audience was dead silent now, hanging on every word. Even the production crew had stopped their usual bustling around the set. This wasn't going according to anyone's script. "I didn't appoint myself anything," Joy replied, her voice dripping with condescension. "But I do have a platform, and I'm going to use it to speak truth to power. Even when that power comes wrapped in a charming smile and a comeback story." Gibson stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You know what, Joy? You're absolutely right about one thing. You do have a platform, and you're using it to ambush a guest who came here in good faith to discuss his work. That says a lot more about you than it does about me." "Sit down, Mel," Joy said, her tone now ice cold. "You don't get to play the victim here. Not after everything you've done." "I'm not playing anything," Gibson replied, still standing. "But I'm also not going to sit here and let you use me as your punching bag for whatever personal agenda you're pushing today." Whoopi tried desperately to regain control of the situation. "Okay, everyone, let's just take a breath here. Mel, please sit down and Joy, maybe we can approach this differently." But Joy wasn't backing down. If anything, Gibson's defiance seemed to fuel her fire. "No, Whoopi. I think this is exactly the conversation we need to be having. Mel, you talk about good faith, But where was that good faith when you were making those statements years ago? Where was it when you hurt people with your words? Gibson slowly sat back down, but his posture remained rigid. You want to talk about hurting people with words, Joy? Let's talk about what you're doing right now. You invited me here under the pretense of discussing my film, and instead you're trying to relitigate my entire past on live television. Your past is part of who you are, Joy snapped. It's part of what informs your work, your perspective, everything you create. You can't just compartmentalize it away because it's convenient. And you can't use someone's lowest moments to define their entire existence, Gibson countered. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and I've spent years working to understand them and grow from them. But apparently that's not enough for you. Sarah Haynes finally found her voice. Maybe we could talk about how those experiences influence the themes in your new film. Art often comes from personal struggle. Oh, please, Joy interrupted, rolling her eyes. Are we really going to pretend that making a movie is some kind of penance? That's not how accountability works. Gibson's eyes flashed with anger. You know what's interesting, Joy? You sit there talking about accountability, but when have you ever been held accountable for the divisive things you say on this show? When have you apologized for the times you've been wrong or hurtful? That's completely different. And you know it, Joy shot back. Is it? Gibson leaned forward, his voice gaining strength. You use this platform every single day to make sweeping statements about people, to judge and condemn without knowing the full story. But somehow that's different because you're on the right side of politics. The audience began to murmur. Some people were nodding along with Gibson's words while others looked uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. Don't you dare try to flip this around on me, Joy said, her voice rising. I'm not the one with a history of bigoted statements. I'm not the one who needs to explain myself. Everyone needs to explain themselves, Gibson replied firmly. The difference is I'm willing to do it honestly. I'm willing to admit when I've been wrong, but you hide behind your righteousness like it's some kind of shield that protects you from criticism. Sonny Hostin tried to jump in. I think what Joy is trying to say is that there are certain lines that, once crossed, change how we view someone permanently. Gibson turned to her with a look of genuine curiosity. And who gets to decide where those lines are, Sonny? Who gets to determine which mistakes are forgivable and which ones aren't? Is there a committee somewhere that makes these decisions? Society decides, Joy interjected. The court of public opinion decides, and you've been found wanting. The court of public opinion, Gibson repeated slowly. You mean the same court that changes its mind every few years about who's acceptable and who isn't? The same court that destroys people's lives based on incomplete information and then moves on to the next target? Now you're just being dramatic, Joy said dismissively. Am I? Gibson's voice was steady but intense. How many careers have been destroyed by this court you're so fond of? How many people have been written off entirely based on their worst moments? And yet here you sit, comfortable in your position, throwing stones from your glass house. My house isn't glass, Mel. I've built my career on standing up for what's right. No, Joy. You've built your career on tearing other people down while claiming the moral high ground. There's a difference. The studio fell silent again. Even the crew members were exchanging glances. This had gone far beyond a typical celebrity interview gone wrong. Whoopi made another attempt at damage control. Mel, Joy, I think we're all getting a little heated here. Maybe we should. No, let him finish, Joy said, her voice dripping with mock interest. I want to hear more about how I'm the problem here. Please enlighten us all about my failings. Gibson stared at her for a long moment before responding. You really want to know what I think your failing is, Joy? It's not that you have strong opinions. It's that you've confused having opinions with having wisdom. You've convinced yourself that your anger makes you righteous, but all it really makes you is loud. At least I'm angry about the right things, Joy fired back. Are you? Or are you just angry because it gets you attention? Because it makes you feel important? There's a difference between righteous anger and self-righteous indignation. And I think you've crossed that line a long time ago. Joy's face was flushing red now. How dare you psychoanalyze me? You don't know anything about my motivations or my character. I know what I see sitting across from me, Gibson replied calmly. I see someone who invited a guest onto their show not to have a conversation but to score points. Someone who's more interested in being right than in being fair. Fair? Joy laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you... Stop, Gibson said firmly, raising his hand. Just stop. We can go around and around about my past mistakes until the end of time. But that's not going to change anything. The question is, what are we doing now? Right now, in this moment, who's behaving better? The question hung in the air like a challenge that nobody wanted to answer. Joy's mouth opened and closed several times as she struggled to formulate a response that wouldn't make her look even worse than she already did. That's not the point, she finally managed to say, but her voice had lost some of its earlier venom. Isn't it, though? Gibson pressed, sensing he had gained the upper hand. Isn't behavior in the present moment exactly the point? You keep talking about accountability and change, but you won't acknowledge when someone has actually changed. You won't give credit where credit is due, because it doesn't fit your narrative. Sarah Haynes, clearly uncomfortable with the silence from Joy, tried to redirect. Mel, can you tell us about the journey of making this film and how? No, Sarah, Joy interrupted, finding her voice again. We're not moving on from this. Mel thinks he can waltz in here and lecture me about fairness and behavior. That's rich coming from someone with your history. And there it is again, Gibson said, shaking his head with what looked like genuine disappointment. Every time we get close to having an actual conversation about growth and redemption, you retreat back to the past. It's like you're stuck in a time loop. I'm not stuck anywhere, Joy snapped. I'm holding you accountable for your actions. No, you're not, Gibson replied firmly. You're punishing me for them. There's a huge difference. Accountability leads to growth and understanding. Punishment just leads to more resentment and division. Whoopi tried once more to intervene. Maybe we can agree that both accountability and forgiveness have their place. Don't, Joy said sharply, turning on her co-host. Don't you dare try to both sides this, Whoopi. Some things are unforgivable. Gibson's eyebrows shot up. Unforgivable? That's your position? That some human beings are beyond redemption? I didn't say human beings. I said some things. But things are done by human beings, Joy. If the things are unforgivable, then you're saying the people who do them are unforgivable too. That's a pretty dark worldview for someone who claims to be fighting for justice. Justice isn't dark. It's necessary. What you're describing isn't justice, it's revenge. Justice includes the possibility of redemption. What you're advocating for is permanent condemnation. Joy stood up now, matching Gibson's earlier move. You know what? I don't have to sit here and listen to a philosophy lecture from someone who... Who what? Gibson interrupted, standing up as well. Who made mistakes, who said terrible things, who hurt people. Yes, Joy. I did all of those things. But I also learned from them. I also grew. I also changed. And if you can't see that, if you refuse to see that, then you're the one with the problem. I don't have a problem seeing anything clearly, Joy shot back. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've built your entire identity around being perpetually outraged. And the scary part is I don't think you even know how to turn it off anymore. The audience was completely silent now, but the tension was electric. Sunny Hostin looked like she was ready to call security, while Sarah Haynes was practically hiding behind her coffee mug. You think outrage is bad? Joy asked, her voice getting louder. You think being angry about injustice is somehow wrong? I think being angry all the time about everything makes you lose sight of what really matters, Gibson replied. I think it makes you cruel, and I think it makes you exactly the kind of person you claim to be fighting against. How dare you? How dare I? What? Point out the truth? You want to know what I see when I look at you, Joy? I see someone who's become so addicted to moral superiority that you've forgotten what actual morality looks like. Joy's face was now completely red. You have no right to talk to me about morality. I have every right to defend myself when I'm being attacked on national television, Gibson fired back. And make no mistake, that's what this is. This isn't journalism. It's not holding me accountable. It's a public execution disguised as an interview. If you feel like you're being executed, maybe that tells you something about your own guilt. Gibson laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Or maybe it tells me something about your methods. You know what the difference is between us, Joy? When I hurt people, I admitted it. When I was wrong, I owned it. But you hurt people every single day with this show, and you convince yourself it's noble. I don't hurt people. I expose the truth. You destroy people for ratings. You take their lowest moments and turn them into entertainment. And the worst part is you sleep well at night because you've convinced yourself you're doing God's work. Whoopi finally found her backbone. Okay, that's enough from both of you. We need to. No, Whoopi, Gibson said, never taking his eyes off Joy. Let's finish this. Joy wants to have this conversation so badly. Let's have it. Tell me, Joy, in your perfect world, what happens to people who make mistakes? What's the appropriate punishment for someone like me? You should face consequences for your actions. I have faced consequences. I lost work. I lost respect. I lost relationships. But that's not enough for you, is it? You want permanent exile. I want people to remember who you really are. And who am I really, Joy? Please enlighten me. Tell me who I am based on the worst things I've ever said. Joy hesitated for a moment, seeming to realize she was walking into a trap, but her anger carried her forward. You're a bigot. You're someone who revealed their true character when they thought nobody important was listening. Gibson nodded slowly. And that's it. That's the sum total of my existence. 30+ years in this industry, dozens of films, charitable work, raising children, building relationships. None of that matters because of the worst things I've ever said. Actions have consequences. They do. But you know what else has consequences, Joy? This. What you're doing right now. Refusing to acknowledge growth. Refusing to allow for redemption. Turning every conversation into a battle. That has consequences, too. What's that supposed to mean? Gibson gestured toward the audience, many of whom were now looking uncomfortable and checking their phones. It means people are getting tired of it. They're tired of the anger, tired of the division, tired of being told that they have to hate people forever based on their worst moments. I don't tell people to hate anyone. Don't you? Because that's sure what it sounds like to me. You're telling them that I'm irredeemable, that nothing I do going forward matters, that they should judge me forever based on things I said years ago when I was in the darkest place of my life. Joy sat back down heavily, but her jaw remained set. Those things you said weren't just words, Mel. They hurt people. They reinforced dangerous stereotypes. And I've spent years working to undo that damage, Gibson interrupted. I've worked with the communities I hurt. I've educated myself. I've tried to use my platform more responsibly. But you don't want to talk about any of that because it complicates your narrative. Your narrative is the problem, not mine. My narrative is that people can change. That redemption is possible. That we should judge each other based on our full humanity, not just our failures. What's your narrative, Joy? That some people are permanently broken. That forgiveness is weakness. That anger is the highest virtue. Sonny Hostin finally spoke up. I think what Joy is trying to say. No, Sonny, let Joy speak for herself, Gibson said. I want to hear her defend this worldview she's promoting. I want to hear her explain how permanent condemnation makes the world a better place. Joy looked around the table at her hosts, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from concern to outright alarm. The producers off stage were making frantic hand gestures, clearly wanting someone to end this segment. Fine, Joy said finally. You want to know what I think? I think some people use redemption as a shield. They apologize not because they've genuinely changed, but because they want to get back to where they were before. They want forgiveness without earning it. And how does one earn forgiveness in your estimation? Through consistent action over time, not through charm and media appearances. Gibson leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing on his lips. Consistent action over time. That's interesting. How long would that take, do you think? 5 years, 10, 20? Or is it possible that no amount of time would be enough for someone like you? It's not about time, it's about sincerity. And who judges sincerity? You. Other people in media? The same people who built careers on conflict and controversy? You'll have to forgive me if I don't trust that tribunal. The studio was dead quiet except for the hum of the cameras and lights. Even the audience seemed afraid to breathe too loudly. You know what the real tragedy is here, Joy? Gibson continued, his voice now calm and measured. You had an opportunity today to have a real conversation about growth and change and forgiveness. You could have asked me tough questions while still treating me with basic human dignity. You could have held me accountable while also acknowledging progress. Instead, you chose to make this about your own ego. My ego? Joy's voice cracked slightly. Yes, your ego. Your need to be the righteous one, the moral authority, the one who gets to decide who deserves redemption and who doesn't. That's not justice, Joy. That's just another form of bullying. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time since the interview began, she looked truly speechless. Gibson stood up again, this time with calm dignity rather than anger. I came here today to talk about a film that I'm proud of, that tells an important story about resilience and redemption. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who seems to believe that redemption is impossible. That tells me everything I need to know about this show and its values. He began to remove his microphone as the producers scrambled. Thank you to the other hosts for trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism. As for you, Joy, I hope someday you find whatever it is you're really looking for, because this isn't it. With that, Mel Gibson walked off the set of The View, leaving behind a stunned audience and a host who had finally bitten off more than she could chew. What did you think of this explosive exchange? Was Joy out of line, or was she just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. What other celebrity interviews do you think went too?